We're going to turn our attention now to God's Word, to the Bible, and we've been in a series called Relationships on the Rocks. That's a nice, warm title, isn't it, right? But the last couple of weeks, we've actually talked about some good things as well. We're looking at different relationships in the book of Genesis that the Bible describes. Right off the bat, humans do some things very well, and we do some things very poorly when it comes to relationships. And so we've seen some positives that we can emulate and imitate with our lives and our relationships, and we've seen some negatives that we need to be careful about and we need to avoid throughout this series. And today we're going to kind of delve back into the negative side of the way that our relationships can lean and see if maybe even unknowingly, if we have deception in some way, forming our relationships with people and creating some hindrances. But before we get into that, I want to recap last week, if you weren't here with us. We talked about the idea of coincidence and how in the Bible, it's not always coincidence, but God sometimes orchestrates our circumstances so that things just fall into place, circumstantially or with timing or with answered prayer or with confirmation from other people. And so we got into that a little bit last week. We talked about this. The Bible calls it a happening or a happening that happened. That's how it describes a divine coincidence, something that God's behind. But Abraham asked his household manager to go to his family's homeland, 600 miles away, and find a wife from his family, his relations, his hometown, for his son Isaac to marry. And so Abraham's servant makes the trek with 10 camels and several other people, and he decides to set up camp outside the community by a well. And he prays this prayer. Okay, God, I need to find a wife for Isaac. It needs to be the right person. And so if you would just do me the favor of sending the right woman my way to go get water, I'll know her this way. One, she's going to offer me a drink. And secondly, she's going to offer to water my camels as well. I actually saw a reel on Instagram this last week about camels drinking, which is kind of, ironic considering last week we talked about that. But it was a video, and it showed a camel consuming 50 gallons of water in 3 minutes flat. Can you imagine that? Think about how fast the gas pump goes. I guarantee you it doesn't go at 50 gallons a minute, right? That would be impressive. But camels, or in 3 minutes, they can inhale vast quantities of water. And so think about this woman with her 2.5-gallon clay pot going back and forth to water 10 thirsty camels at 30 to 50 gallons apiece. What an outlandish prayer. But before he stops praying, a girl walks up, offers him a drink, and says, hey, can I water your camels for you as well, even though you have some other people here that are capable of doing that? I'd like to do this for you. I want to serve you in that way. And he's just blown away. And she says, by the way, I'm a part of Nahor is my grandfather. He's related to somebody named Abraham, coincidentally. And so all these things start to line up. It's like the timing and the circumstances and the things that he's been praying for, they're all just dovetailing together. And as the situation unfolds over the next 24 hours, they have conversations with this girl's father and brother, and they say, yeah, we recognize the Lord's hand in this as well. It's further confirmation. And then they talk to Rebecca and say, would you be willing, I know this is crazy, would you be willing to completely uproot your life and move to a strange land 600 miles away to marry somebody that you don't even know who's a distant relative? Okay, I'll do it. And sometimes we see in our own lives God's hand. There's no other way of describing it. And we just see the writing on the wall, so to say. And sometimes we can look for those similar things in God's work in our lives in ways that, they're beyond coincidental, right? And that's part of relationships. As I mentioned today, we're looking at deception and how that can kind of become a hindrance in our relationships. And I want to give you a couple important Bible words and phrases as we get into this. I like to do that often just because we have our own ideas about what terms in the Bible mean, and a lot of times they're very different from what things originally meant. And so 2 words we're going to come across in our discussion are birthright and blessing. How many of you have heard those words before? Okay. So a birthright, and this is in the ancient world, it's a privilege given to you if you're a firstborn son. How many of you are firstborn children? Okay, a few firstborns. I am, my wife is as well. And so for us, in their culture, for the firstborn male, okay, they would receive twice as much inheritance as all the other brothers and leadership over the family once the father passed on. Okay, so that's birthright. And then there's the blessing, which is something different. And that's a father's promise that God will bless a specific child with prosperity and descendants and well-being. Okay? And in these patriarchal father-led systems, oftentimes they would bless the oldest child in the family as well, so they get the birthright and they get the blessing. Now, it's interesting if you dial this back to the early chapters of Genesis, is that really God blessed humanity and said, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, right? Rule over all the creatures that I've made and the environment that I've made. And so every human was intended to get the blessing, but people kind of defined good for themselves and said, I'll just convey this on one of my children instead of pass this along to everyone. So we're going to encounter those ideas as we move through things today. But we're going to look at deception from a couple perspectives. The first is motives. What motivates deception in our relationships? I don't deceive anyone in my relationships. I think maybe we all, from time to time, even in small ways we don't recognize, we might import that idea, and we'll dig into that a little bit today. So now these are not from Genesis chapter 27. These are precursors, where you get hints in the story before what we're talking about today about what's really going on. And a couple chapters before the story we're going to get into, this is what Genesis says. It says, when the boys grew up, Esau became an expert hunter and outdoorsman. But Jacob was a quiet man who stayed at home. So you've got two contrasting brothers, very different interests, right? Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for wild game. But Rebekah loved Jacob. So right off the bat, we figure out that favoritism plays a role in this family. How many of you are parents out there? Okay, sometimes our kids might be easier or more challenging for us to deal with as parents. And so the danger is that we too might develop favorites. Or maybe somebody's just very similar to us and relatable, or we like to have conversations with one child, and the other child is like somebody from a foreign planet showed up in our family, right? It's so hard for us to relate. But maybe with our spouse, it's completely opposite. And so that's the case in this family, and it complicates things because it becomes something that cultivates deception. It becomes a motive behind that. Also, another detail about their family, it says there was this one time, when Jacob was cooking a stew, because he's the guy that's in the home, right? Esau came in from the field exhausted. I mean, I don't know, maybe he'd been out hunting for days without success. And he said to Jacob, let me have some of that red stuff because I'm exhausted. And it says that's why he was also named Edom, which means red. Okay, it's a place name in the Bible. It's his nickname. Jacob replied, first, sell me your birthright. He's working an angle. Do you remember what a birthright was? It was a double portion of the inheritance, right? And leadership over the entire family after the father passes away. And what's the price for that? A bowl of stew. Isn't that incredible? Jacob is working an angle. He's looking for opportunities to take advantage of his brother. And this is something that happens over and over and over again. And sometimes deception happens because somebody's just looking to gain an advantage over someone else for a variety of different reasons. And Esau gives in. He says, what good is my birthright to me if I'm dead? Sure, let's make a deal. And he does. And it says he despises his birthright. He sells his birthright off for a bowl of soup. Third, last motive. When Esau was 40 years old, he took as his wives Judith, daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Basemath, daughter of Elon the Hethite. They made life bitter for Isaac and Rebekah. So also something that's brewing. How many of your families maybe are complex, right? We have complex dynamics operating in our homes and our families, our extended families, even with our grown kids and grandkids, right? It gets complex. And so there's this complicated aspect where Isaac and Rebekah, they resent Esau's wives. He takes two of them. It doesn't fill in the details as to exactly why, but whatever it is, they just are so resentful of the two women that their son Esau chooses to marry. And so that's motivating some of this deception too. People are starting to take sides for other reasons besides favoritism. Sometimes it's annoyance, right? So let me ask this question. We'll stop for these kinds of questions 2 or 3 times this morning. But what might motivate us to deceive our family members and our friends? You say, well, nothing. I'm honest. I'm open. What could possibly motivate me to be deceptive? How many of you love criticism? How about conflict? Any takers? Maybe sometimes we are deceptive and we deceive because we want to avoid conflict. Or we don't want to be criticized. So we don't want to be vulnerable and reveal our weaknesses, our own flaws or failures. Maybe sometimes we don't like to hurt other people. And they asked us something, but if we tell them honestly like it is, we know it's going to crush them. And so we just tell a little white lie, just kind of bend the truth a little bit. Maybe we want to carry the burden of worry or stress, and so we just don't quite tell it like it is to keep that burden from someone else. Like ignorance is bliss, right? And we want to keep somebody else in that state of ignorance. Maybe it's our image. We care about our reputation and what people think, and if they knew certain things about us, maybe they wouldn't respect us quite as much as they do currently. So we're just going to keep that more private. Maybe it's shame or insecurity that we're trying to cover up. Maybe it's vulnerability that we don't want to have with someone. Or maybe it's just a learned behavior. Your family growing up, they were deceptive with each other. They always told lies and half-truths, and sometimes they did it, to get an advantage or to avoid consequences or whatever. And so it just became normal for you. Or it was necessary. It was kind of like a survival mode for you, was being deceptive. And that's the case in this family with Isaac and Rebekah. Isaac's dad and mom, they were deceptive in different ways, and we know Isaac, he had this tendency to be deceptive, and now we're going to see his son have the same tendency, and his wife have the same tendency to be deceptive that Isaac and his father had. And so sometimes we just learn these patterns from the way that our family operates in unhealthy ways, even for generations. And all these things can motivate us to be less than honest in our family situations or in other relationships, with friendships, etc. Maybe work relationships. All these kinds of things apply. So those are some of the motives, but now let's look at the misdirection. What does deception in a relationship context look like, or what might it look like? First, we're going to look at their relationship context, and then we're going to bring it back and look at how this might play out in our own families and our own relationships. It says, when Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could not see, he called his older son Esau, and he said to him, "My son." When he answered, "Here I am," he said, "Look, I'm old. I don't know the day of my death. So now take your hunting gear, take your quiver, and go out to the field and hunt some game for me. Then make me a delicious meal that I love and bring it to me to eat so that I can bless you before I die." So he had a family meeting, right? He said, "Hey, Rebekah, Esau, Jacob, come on in. Let's talk about this. We're going to make a very significant decision. We're going to impart the family blessing," which again has to do with descendants and prosperity and well-being. We're going to choose a son to give that to. And so let's talk about this. Who do we want to impart this blessing to? Now, don't mind that it's intended for every human originally, but who does our family want to give this to? Let's make a collective decision. Is that how this played out? No. Now, who was Isaac's favorite? Esau. Yeah, he's the hunter, and he loves game. So, of course, he's going to have a side conversation and say, let's just do this blessing thing under the table and get this done with, and we don't have to tell anyone about it. So he makes a huge decision without consulting his wife because he knows she's going to disagree. Anybody ever done that? I know people who have made very significant decisions, maybe financially related decisions. What are we going to do with this investment or this inheritance? They just forgot to consult their spouse before those huge decisions were made. How do you think those decisions flew over? Really well, right? No conflict resulted from those kinds of things. So Isaac thinks, it's all good. What's going to happen? I'll just do this and we won't have a conversation about it because I know my wife wouldn't agree. I'll just take matters in my own hands. Now, Rebekah, she was listening on the other side of the tent wall or something to what Isaac said to his son Esau. Sometimes when we plan out these, deceptions, other people, they might be listening. They might be aware, even though we're unaware, right? So while Esau went to the field to hunt some game to bring in, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "Listen, I heard your dad talking with your brother Esau. He said, 'Bring me some game, make me a delicious meal to eat so I can bless you in the Lord's presence before I die.' Now, my son, listen to me. Do exactly as I tell you. Go to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats and I'll make them into a delicious meal for your father, the kind he loves. And then take it to your father to eat, so he may bless you before he dies." So Rebekah again catches wind of Isaac's plan to deceive her and not tell her about this whole blessing that's going to happen. She says, "Well, I can match that. I'll just deceive him, and he won't even know. We're going to take my favorite son and make sure that he receives the family blessing, not his favorite son." And so she encourages Jacob to deceive his father and steal Esau's blessing. And sometimes there are people in our lives who might encourage us to be dishonest. I had a friend years ago who worked for a used car dealership, and he had an employer at the time who was telling him, "When you sell this vehicle, you need to lie about the condition of it. Be dishonest with the customer, because ultimately we're after the sale. We don't care about honesty. We just care about money and profit. And if you want to do well here, you're going to have to be dishonest." And my friend said, "I can't work that job anymore because you're requiring me not to tell the truth." But sometimes we have voices speaking into our lives, or even just a little voice in our head that says, "You don't have to tell the truth, at least not fully. You can be dishonest to get ahead." So that's what Rebekah's voice is in the story. But Jacob, he's thinking, and he says, "Look, my brother Esau is a hairy guy, but I've got smooth skin. How's this going to happen? Suppose my father touches me. Then I'm going to be revealed to him as a deceiver and bring a curse rather than a blessing on myself." So he's thinking, what if I get caught? What's going to happen then, right? Talks about him being a smooth man, right, instead of a hairy one. Is there anything else in the early chapters of the Bible that has really smooth skin that's deceptive? Slithers, yeah, snake. And so Jacob's being painted as this snake in this story. And so he says, he doesn't say, is this morally correct? He just says, well, what if I get caught? I've deceived my brother once already out of his birthright. Like, I'm up for doing it again, but what if I get caught? And sometimes we see our mind asking those kinds of questions. We don't have a moral problem with being deceptive, but we're thinking, well, what if I get caught? And we're weighing that. It's another reality of deception. We think those thoughts, right? When we should be thinking, is this right? We think, well, what happens if I get caught? What are the consequences? So his mom says, "Your curse be on me, my son. Just obey me and go get them for me." So he goes and gets the goats and brings them to his mom. His mom makes delicious food that his dad loves. And then Rebekah took the best clothes of her older son Esau, right, which were in the house, and she had her younger son Jacob wear them. She put the skins of the young goats on his hands and the smooth part of his neck. And so now Jacob, the smooth-skinned man, is hairy, right? So if his dad comes to embrace him, he'll feel that, and he'll notice these are the best clothes of my oldest son, Esau. Then she handed him the delicious food and the bread she had made, and when he came to his father, he said, "My father." And he answered, "Here I am. Who are you, my son?" Jacob replied, "I'm Esau, your firstborn. I've done as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game so that you may bless me," right? So he's pretending here to be someone else. And that's really the heart of it. You think, well, I don't pretend to be anyone else. Yeah, right. We all have moments in relationships where we pretend to be people who we aren't. And sometimes it takes small forms. Put this question: how might we pretend to be someone else whom we are not in a relationship? How is men's coffee this morning? Oh, great, honey. I just had one donut. You'd be proud. Or maybe, you spend a little too much time scrolling on social media at night, and your partner talks to you the next morning. How late were you up last night? Oh, I went to bed 10 or 15 minutes after you did. It's fine. It was really like 2.5 hours that you got stuck on social media scrolling through things. How long is it going to be? I'll be ready in 5 minutes. I promise. Hey, have you called the plumber yet? Yeah. I called him last week, but I haven't heard back from him. I'll give him a call today. I don't have any idea where that $300 charge to Outdoor World came from on our credit card statement. I better call the company. How are you doing? I'm fine. Really? Yeah, I'm fine. Did you enjoy that polka festival that we went to with my parents last weekend? It was great. Never been to one before. Can't wait to go to one again. Are you almost home? Traffic's really horrible right now. I'm going to be a little late. So sometimes it's simple things that we say for one reason or another, and we're dishonest. And then other times, it takes more tragic forms. I promise, our relationship is strictly professional. We have to travel together for business. It's company policy. Or, yeah, we're still making it. I'm keeping up with the bills. No problem. Or, I don't have any idea who sent that text message to my phone. It caught me off guard, too. I don't know anyone by that name. Must have been a wrong number. Or, no, I'm not drinking again. I've just been really tired and mentally exhausted for the past few weeks. Or, yeah, doctor said the treatment seems to be working fine. And sometimes we pretend to be people who we're not to the people that we care about the most, right? We're not immune sometimes either. And so we keep looking at this misdirection, and now Isaac, he's kind of wondering, and he says to his son, Jacob, "How did you find it so quickly, my son?" Talking about the game that he went out to hunt. Like, has it been enough time for you to go hunting and catch something and, cook a meal? And Jacob says, "It's because the Lord your God made it happen for me." That's that word from last week, right? It's a coincidence. Got lucky. God just had the animal right out there, aimed, shot it, killed it, brought it back, skinned it, cleaned it, cooked it, prepared it, right here. God made it happen. Isn't God good? Woo! And so he lies about God's activity. And maybe that's a form of deception. We credit God for things that God's not responsible for and didn't do and wouldn't do, but we say, oh, yep, God's really supportive of this thing that we maybe want, but we know someone else doesn't, right? We use God to prop up our arguments. Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Please come closer so I can touch you, my son. Are you really my son Esau or not?" So Jacob came closer to his father Isaac. When he touched him, he said, "The voice is the voice of Jacob. This is strange, but the hands are the hands of Esau." It says he didn't recognize him because his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau, and so he blessed him. Before he did, he said, "Are you really my son Esau?" And he said, "I am." Then he said, yes. He said, "Bring it closer to me and let me eat some of my son's game that I can bless you." And Jacob brought it closer to him, and he ate. He brought him wine, and he drank. And then his father Isaac said to him, "Please come closer and kiss me, my son." So he came closer and kissed him. And when Isaac smelled the clothes, Esau's clothes, he blessed him. So it worked, right? Isaac falls for Jacob's deception. And sometimes we see that when we deceive people, even the people closest to us, they do fall for it. We tell them, "I'm fine," and they say, "Oh, all right, I'll take your word for it." Or, "Yeah, that credit card charge to Outdoor World, it was an accident." And they're like, "Okay, call the company, that's fine." And we're like, "They bought that? That's amazing." But it's not amazing, right? Because it erodes trust in relationships. And so those are some ways that misdirection plays a role in their relationship. But are there consequences? Does anything happen because they're using deception in their relationships? Well, for their family, there's a cycle of dishonesty between Isaac and Rebekah that's been continuing, that he kind of learned from his family. And then there's also a cycle of dishonesty between Isaac and Esau and Jacob that's continuing. There's been mistrust for years. And this is just another thing to undermine trust in all those relationships. And so the cycle of dishonesty is perpetuated. It just continues, and it keeps eroding trust in relationships. That's one consequence. Another one is for Esau, because Esau is the one who's receiving the collateral out of all of this. He's taken advantage of. The guy already made a foolish choice to sell off his birthright, and now he has his blessing stolen from him. He's grieved when he comes in and finds out what's happened shortly thereafter. It says he mourned. He just lost it emotionally and started crying. And then he becomes filled with hatred for his brother because he's lost his birthright and his blessing, the most significant things that he was going to inherit or have as a firstborn. He realizes his brother took advantage of him and took those things, and he plans to murder his brother as soon as his father dies. As soon as dad's gone, I'm going to kill my brother. And he has that plan. And as she's been doing throughout the story, Rebekah's listening into that conversation as well. And so she pulls Jacob aside and says, you got to run. You got to flee. Go back to my family 600 miles away where I came from. You got to save your life. And so Jacob is forced to distance himself from his family for probably a couple of decades in order to save his life. And so various consequences that divide relationships and fill people with grief and hatred and anger and things that perpetuate a cycle of dishonesty in the family, they just keep falling out, right, as consequences. And so that's their family. But how might deception impact our relationships with one another? Our spouses, our kids, our coworkers, our friends, our neighbors. Here's some possibilities. Other people might struggle to trust our future words or actions. Because when you betray trust, then it's like, what do you have to do to earn trust back, right? And so there's that kind of struggle. Well, I don't know. They lied to me last time, so I don't know if they're lying to me this time, right? It takes a long time to earn that back. People might withdraw emotionally or physically from a relationship with us, again, because it affects them on an emotional level. People might feel betrayed or unimportant, right? Why did they lie to me? Why were they dishonest? Did they value me so little to trust me with that? There might be a curiosity about what else is being hidden. Maybe you think, well, it's just one small little thing. But someone else in your life is thinking, if they were dishonest about that, what else is there? And so they start filling in the blanks and assuming and imagining other possibilities, which has more fallout, right? As you try to reassure them, no, I was just dishonest about that thing and not the other stuff, right? You can trust me. Whoever is doing the deceiving, eventually guilt might catch up. And the weight of deception or feeling like you have to keep telling more lies to keep up with the lies that you've told, to keep those things covered up, all of that over time might result in a burden. Resources might be wasted that could have been available for other things. And then there's some friendships and family ties that, if it's deep enough or serious enough, might even never recover potentially. And all those things are the result of dishonesty. And even small ways, can erode trust in our relationships. And so what I want to challenge us with this morning, and myself as well, is just to take a look at our relationships, the most meaningful, closest relationships to us, and ask ourselves if we're being totally honest and vulnerable, or if we're trying to appear to be someone else, someone better, someone who is less prone to be criticized, somebody who is better at handling maybe different temptations or whatever? Or are we being honest with the people closest to us? It's a big challenge. It's something for us to think about, and it can have really monumental consequences on our relationships and really devastate them if we're not careful. So let's pray together this morning.